Hey, what's up, y'all? Got another story today, and today I want to talk about how working in construction changed my life. And I probably wouldn't have been able to become a software engineer if it wasn't for that job. So, if you've heard some of my other stories, you know that I worked in construction right before I became a software engineer straight out of college because I was unable to find a job. And I figured this story is so relatable in so many ways. I think this story is for anybody out there that's trying to actively break into something new, trying to pursue where they want to get to, do what they love, figure out a way to break into something that they really want to do. And it's essentially kind of stuck in a space that isn't the best fit for them right now, or is doing something that wasn't essentially what they would choose to do. I think this is such a common theme, and so many folks are going through that right now. It's a really, really difficult thing to break out of it. And so I figured I'd share this story, see if this is relatable to you, and just talk through some of the concepts and the outcomes of it and why it was so impactful for me when I worked this job. All right, to start things off, right, just to give a little recap, you've seen some of my other stories. Got super bad grades in college, 1.7 GPA, terrible grades, applied to thousands of jobs, didn't land a single one in any sort of field. And I messed up in college, right? I had no direction. So I didn't know that I wanted to be a software engineer at the time, or didn't even know the path to learn how to code. And so I needed a job out of college, and I landed a job in construction. That was the only thing I was able to get. I figured I'd take this job and, I'll teach myself how to code as I worked this job. And this job was very difficult. It was really, really difficult job in the sense that what I mainly did was repairs, estimations, job walks, sampling, and usually my role specifically was to be the first person out onto the site when the client needed something repaired or fixed, that kind of thing. And so you can imagine, right? Day in and day out, I'd be going to these sites, and every single day was a new adventure. The site could have been 5 minutes away, it could have been 5 hours away. And the hours that I put into this job was crazy. On average, it was 10-hour days. Just because I think when you work a construction job, there's so many unaccounted for hours throughout your day that kind of just get tacked on, preparation. It's not even physically doing the job, it's like preparation, your lunchtime, setting up the site, unsetting up the site. Those are all hours that sometimes low key don't get added in correctly. Think, just myself working 10-hour days, 11-hour days. And then, of course, there are sites sometimes were so far away. And some of the sites were so far away that they'd have to get me a hotel to stay overnight just because certain legal reasons, that kind of thing. But the worst ones were actually the ones where I didn't qualify for the hotel, which I had to tack on another 2 or 3 hours for the drive. So easily I was putting in 15-hour days, 16-hour days. A whole day was just that one thing. And if I did get a hotel, I mean, they weren't putting me in the Four Seasons or the Ritz Carlton, right? They were putting me in some of the worst. And till this day, I haven't stayed in a hotel that bad in quite some time. The worst part about that job for me was definitely the actual facilities that I had to go to. The danger of them was kind of frightening at some time. Two stories that I remember very, very vividly was one, I went to a chicken processing farm, and this chicken processing farm had an issue with the corner of their building, which you can imagine this place was prepping and processing. I can't even tell you how many chickens there were there, like 100,000, maybe a million. I don't know, some absurd amount of number. And there's areas of that facility that were bacteria, the remains of the chickens were getting to, that it was like rotting this area, which it needed reconstruction and rebuilding. And of course, that was an area that nobody, a crevice in a corner of a building that nobody wanted to go to, except for the person that has to go fix it, or at least plan to fix it and take samples and that kind of stuff, and do minor tweaks to it. It was me, myself, and my team. We would go went to this corner, and the smell and the visual of it, building rotting from chicken remains, was something I never thought I would see in my life. Another crazy one was that I went to a kind of a materials processing plant, and we had to step into this mechanic room, this room that housed these ginormous, kind of like the engines of the assembly line. They were producing roofing material. And so the roofing material emitted a lot of microscopic and large pieces of fibers that would just go into the air. And this room where this machine was, like when you walked into a room, till this day, I've never walked into a room where the room was like foggy, not based on the weather, but based off of like the machine emitting microplastics essentially into the air. And so we're in this room, and what was crazy is we were just passing by to get to the other end. we had no equipment. We had no like inhalers or masks or anything. So we just had to hold our breath and run right through it, right? And I like I till this day I think about that day and I think about how I probably lost 10 years out of my life because of that single room, right? And so that was this type of the job that I was going through. And so and envision this, right? Every single day I was still going to the library, going finding local colleges, that kind of thing, and sitting down and teaching myself how to code. One awesome thing about the job though, that again, now getting to why I think that job was so valuable to me was because I had a lot of great coworkers, right? And so all of a sudden, from one day to another, one day I was the dumbest kid on campus with a terrible grade point average, now being the person that was the only person that had a college degree in the room, and they used to call me the college boy. And so what a contrast it was every single day. One thing I recognize that I still think about every single day is that a lot of these folks at that job, these weren't their first choice. This wasn't their first choice to do this. I know, even myself, I did come to learn the job. There was a lot of great aspects. Working with your hands is fun. And sometimes you do get to see some cool things, and it's very rewarding to be able to finish a project. For a lot of folks, including myself, right? This wasn't our first option. If we had it our way, we'd be sitting in a cozy AC room, doing some paperwork, that kind of thing, making our lives much easier if we could. And one aspect about this was that during that time, I didn't think that anybody believed in me and what I was doing because I was just a guy with not very good grades and that kind of thing, right? And so when I stepped into this space, I would talk to the hardcore construction guys, the guys that's been there for like 20 years, and some of the even more manual labor folks, and we would talk about each other's families and stories and that kind of thing, and it made me realize that they did believe in me. They believed in me in the sense that they saw a certain spark and a little bit of hope in what I was able to accomplish, and they saw that this could potentially be just a passing by job for me rather than something that I'd have to do forever. But in many ways, I got the sense that if I were to prolong my stay every single year, every single month that I prolong my stay, trying to break out of it would be harder and harder and harder. And that was a frightening thought. And I think that myself and all the folks there were did not want that for me, and knew I could do something else and leverage my other talents to do something bigger. I think about that job every single day, right? I think about a job every single day because, like, even the most difficult coding days that I have, the hardest days, is nowhere as difficult as risking your life for just to look at a part of a building, that kind of thing, right? And so every day I'm grateful that I was able to make it out of that circumstance. And again, on the spectrum of being a really hardcore risky job, I think about the folks that are still out there and in those fields. I believe are probably most of my coworkers probably did not make it out of that realm, if or maybe they just work for a different construction company, a different trade. And I just think about how if they had it their way, they would easily trade with me any single day given of the week. All right, to sum this up, right? I just think about how big of a contrast that was every single day for me, right? I would uh, I would essentially be working this job, 5 minutes before risking my life, standing on some work site that I had no business being on, and then going to my local college, seeing college kids talk about the party they were at, or the drama that they had, or whatever it may be, and I just never viewed things like that until I had this job. And so it made it easier. It made it really, really easy to be able to just sit at a desk and plug away at programming for myself. And I think about this, right? Another really tough aspect that I think about is, man, I saw the trajectory of where this was headed. For one, it wasn't something that I wanted to do. And for two, I didn't think that had a future, or it gave me much of a future moving forward. So I think about how difficult it would be if I didn't at least give myself a shot to pursue what I wanted to do in my life. I think about how tough my life would have been if I wouldn't have at least full force gave myself a shot to be able to learn how to do what I love, which at the time just, happened to be programming. And that's always the advice now that I give out. I always like to give out the advice, at least help folks that I mentor think about, right? First things first, is this something that you're really passionate about? Is there something that you really love to do? And outside of the money, outside of how hard the circumstances, outside of how difficult it may be, for example, software engineering right now is a very difficult market to break in, harder than it has been in a while. Outside of all of that, how much do you really value this, and how much do you dream and want to be able to achieve this goal for yourself, and how much you love doing this? If you love it a lot, I think what's more difficult than looking for a job in a difficult market, for example, or the difficulties of learning how to become that trade or that skill, what's more difficult is not giving yourself the full chance to go after it. And looking back at this time period, and even if you failed, being able to look at yourself and say, I wish I gave that a shot, and now I'm stuck in this job that I don't want to do for the rest of my life. And now I'm 40, and I it's going to be really difficult for me to break out, even more difficult than for me to break out of this. I think that's what I think about, and I think that's why I'm ultimately always grateful for to be able to do something that was so contrasting every single day. Is it made me really recognize who I wanted to become, what I really wanted to do, and made me see that if I wasn't going to go after it, if I wasn't going to take the risk that came with pursuing that goal, my other alternatives were not much brighter. And so, yeah, every day I think about how grateful I am for that opportunity and how much it changed my life to have worked that time period in that role. All right, so that's kind of all I had for that. Love to hear your thoughts on that, and just see if that's relatable at all. And if it is, I'd love to actually hear your story as well as to what you're after. If it sounds relatable, and if you want me to talk about anything else, love to hear it as well. Love your suggestions, and if not, I'll talk to you on the next one. Later.